Good afternoon. We would like to call the committee of the whole meeting for January the 28th to order at 4 p.m. We'll begin with the adoption of the agenda. Council, I've been advised by administration that there is a recommendation to drop the closed session item as there's no information at this point to support moving forward with that item. Mr. Mayor. Oh, I apologize. Thank you so much. The town of Hinton respectfully acknowledges that it is located on the First Peoples traditional lands. We recognize this traditional territory to show respect and understanding to those who walk this land since time immemorial. Today, we uphold our ongoing responsibility to work together in the spirit of the intent of the treaties with all the First Peoples and nations that call this place home. The town expresses gratitude for the opportunity to build a better community on these sacred lands for generations to come. And with that, we'll make sure that we call the meeting to order and look back to the adoption of the agenda. So council, as I was mentioning, admin is looking to drop the closed session item labeled 7.1. So we will need at minimum, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I'll move that we remove item 7.1 from the agenda.
Thank you very much. Council, any other additions or changes to the agenda before we move forward? More discussion on that, seeing none, then we will call to question. That committee remove the closed session item. You can please vote electronically now. Okay, and that is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Council, anything else for the agenda? Mr. Mayor?
Move that we adopt the agenda as presented, or sorry, as amended.
Thank you very much. Before doing so, I'll just double check with administration. Admit there's any other changes recommended to the agenda?
Nothing else for administration.
There we go. Council, anything further before we call to question? Seeing none, we'll call to question that committee adopt the agenda as amended. Please vote now. And that is carried unanimously. Thank you very much, council. That brings us to citizens minute with council. We do have one registered group with us today, and that's Hinton Search and Rescue. And Mr. Dave Dower, I believe, is going to be presenting for us. Yeah, please, Dave, if you don't mind, even though I just said it, if you don't mind just introducing yourself a little bit for us.
Yeah, certainly. For those that don't know me, my name is David Dower. I'm the president of Hinton Search and Rescue. I'm joined by a lot of my board members this evening. I'd like to take the time to thank you guys for having us. Trying to keep this short and sweet. Ultimately, thank you so much for taking the time to give us that letter of support, which it was the enabling factor to get the grant for Canadian Red Cross. Without it, we wouldn't have it. So the sum of which is $93,630.68. That's the grand total. With those funds, we plan on utilizing them for training events, equipment purchases, and to make sure that we have a mock search scenario, or sorry, a mock disaster. It's going to be held on May 3rd and 4th, so a Saturday and a Sunday of this year. And ultimately, we're going to be having partner agencies along with STAR teams from both Hinton and throughout the entire province, along with town of Hinton employees are going to be part of it. Ultimately, it's to stand up BCC, making sure that everyone has an opportunity to go through the motions when there's actually no real event going on. Especially a lot of people in this room have been involved where either the Edson, Jasper, Wildwood, or otherwise fire disasters in the last 3 years. So it's a good opportunity to kind of bolster that communication, roll out some of the errors, if there is any errors, mitigate those errors before they actually, hopefully not, but if in the event that there is a natural disaster, we'll be better served by everybody. So pending any questions, that's pretty much what we have. Again, thank you so much for those that took the time to offer that letter of support. So thank you.
Thank you so much. On behalf of council and of course the citizens, thanks so much for your hard work. Your leadership in pursuing that kind of grant and then hosting that kind of exercise to make sure that everybody in the community can benefit from that added layer of safety and what you do for us. So thank you. Council, is there anything for search and rescue while they're here? Thank you. Perfect. We appreciate this.
Thank you.
We'll go ahead and excuse ourselves.
Super exciting stuff.
Figure out our logo? No problem. Well, you can walk all the way up there, Billy.
Have a good night.
Go PPCI.
Okay, Jen, is there anyone else registered for minute with council? Then we will move on to reports from administration, starting with action item 4.1, branding policy and visual identity guidelines, and we will turn it over to Ms. Borbo. Or is there-
Through the chair, I will pass it over to Ms. Dragon.
Oh, okay, sounds good.
Good afternoon. So our goal was identified in the municipal communication strategy to ensure that town branding and the visual identity is maintained. In support of this goal, we've updated the town's visual identity guidelines, which is a document that outlines our brand elements, our logo, our font, our colors, and drafted a new policy, a branding policy that outlines the principles for managing, protecting, and promoting the town brand. This draft policy is before you today for review and discussion, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Council, any questions? Or comments or directions for administration? Councilor Chambers.
I just wanted to say that you can tell there's an awful lot of work that's gone into the specifics of this, and I really appreciate the amount of work. I've been through this exercise before, and it's not simple to try to check off all the ways to interpret your partners and other groups and communities and all of those things. So I just appreciated how it was laid out. It made a lot of sense, and I think it's a great document to have.
Council, any comments, questions, or directions? Councilor Haas.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm gonna move the committee direct administration to bring the brand policy number 1207 to the future regular meeting of council as presented. And if I can speak to it, yeah, I think this is a very important important document to our organization. Having a branding policy, protecting and having consistency with our visual identity is really important. You know, and it provides those guidelines for our partners that may want to utilize that branding. But it also gives, you know, us some ability to control what that branding looks like. So I think this is really important. It also sets the stage for if in the future, I know there was a discussion of that during budget time to look at rebranding. But if that is something that comes in the future, this policy will really assist in leading that conversation as well. So I do, you know, thank the administration for this. It's a policy that's probably needed a long time ago. So I appreciate it coming forward. So thank you, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Mayor.
And thank you through the chair to administration, great work on the visual identity guidelines document. It's very professional, very well laid out. It seems to hit all of the boxes. I'm curious, what are the planned next steps with our visual identity plan or update plan? Is this the sort of last step, or are there more actions to be taken?
So through the chair to committee, the next steps, we have some updated templates that we will roll out organization-wide with training on this document to ensure that everything we have going forward is consistent and on brand.
Excellent, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council, anything additional before we call the question? Councilor Stashik, there is a direction on the floor that we're looking to vote on, and that is that committee direct administration to bring the branding policy number 1207 to a future regular meeting of council as presented.
Mr. Chair,
Any additional questions, council? Seeing none, then we will call the question. Councilor Ostashik will have to vote by hand. Council, if you could please vote electronically or in the affirmative now.
in favor?
Thank you very much. And that is carried unanimously. Thank you very much, council. Council, is there anything else on action item 4.1? Seeing none, we will move on to council, action item, 4.2. Council Code of Conduct bylaw number 1124-1. Administration.
Thank you, Chair. I will also turn this one over to Ms. Dragon.
So, as directed in the technical plan, we have reviewed administratively the council code of conduct and drafted a self-evaluation tool for council. You have the suggested amendments in front of you today and are available for any questions.
Council, any questions, on the draft document? Councilor Hall?
Yeah, I don't have a question. I don't want to be too quick on the draw with the direction at this point, but I do wanna, you know, I appreciate. We've had this conversation in the past as a council to have a social media kind of policy or bylaw for council, and we've always relied on the code of conduct as that measure. I appreciate the addition into this code of conduct to incorporate and have some direction to follow as a council, not giving us not the right to use social media, but how we conduct ourselves on social media and what the messaging is. So I really appreciate that, because I realize it's not easy as a counselor, you know, because we have different ways of getting information out there and communicating, but and social media being one of those. But I think it's good that we've incorporated that into this document, which wasn't there before. So it left some ambiguity there. So I want to thank administration for those additions.
Counselor, I'm gonna put myself on to next. I'd like to bring up, point 4.6 on page 2 of 11, of the draft, council code of conduct bylaw. And it states, it's a subsection to a point that says, you know, members must not make a statement when they know that statement is false, which again, fine, it makes absolute sense to me. But then 4.6 follows up with members must not make a public statement, including in spoken or written format, which speaks to a potential decision or direction of council prior to the deliberation of that decision and or direction being had at an open meeting of council. So when I read that, I sort of pumped the brakes, because that sounds like everything I do as a counselor. You know what I mean? That's like, hey, Ryan, I heard you guys are talking about you know, the council deliberation bylaw that's coming up. Well, I can't talk to you about that because we haven't decided on that yet. That was my interpretation of that point. I'm hoping I'm wrong on that, or if somebody can clarify that for me, but the way it was written really caused me concern, so if admin can comment on that, please.
Through the chair, I can. So that section isn't designed to make council not be able to speak freely about what's going to be on the council agenda. The intent of that section is really just to project what council is going to do. So that, at least that was my interpretation of it. So if council is making a public statement of on a topic that council has not discussed yet, and say, well, you know, we're going to do this item before the actual debate in proper form has occurred, that's what 4.6 is trying to get at.
Okay, thanks, that helps a lot then, that can see comfort, thank you. Councilor Haas.
Yeah, to build off of that, because I had the same, I appreciate Councilor McEwen bringing it up, had the same thoughts on it, but so that doesn't preclude though that an individual counselor may give an opinion or whatever on a matter that's coming up. This is just that council hasn't decided, but if as a counselor, we were not in favor of something, potentially, we could still speak to that, but it's at that point still, the decision of council has not been made. And we still have that open mind, obviously, but that doesn't stop a counselor from making those comments, or am I misinterpreting that?
And through the chair, is that just some clarification on your example, is that to publicly state, you know, if something comes forward and the counselor makes a public statement to say council is not in favor of this before the debate, I think that would be in violation of 4.6.
Okay.
If we're saying, well, council is not in favor because we haven't had the debate and we haven't discussed it, you know, we need to decide whether we want to do X or Y. I think that would be perfectly fine.
Okay.
But I think it's just a matter of, limiting the projection of decisions because we can only make decisions in proper form.
Right. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Hawes. Council, I don't have anybody else on the speakers list, nor do we have a direction on the floor. Any other questions, comments, or directions? Mr. Mayor?
I'll put a direction on the floor. I'll take the recommended action. The committee directs the administration to bring the council code of conduct bylaw number 1124-1 to a future regular meeting of council as presented.
Do you care to speak to that at all, Mr. Mayor?
I do not.
Okay. Council, any additional comments or discussion? Seeing none, I call the question that committee direct administration to bring the council code of conduct bylaw number 1124-1 to a future regular meeting with council as presented. Council, if you can please vote electronically now. And that is carried unanimously. Thank you very much, council. Council or administration, anything additional on item 4.2? Seeing none, we will move on to 4.3, infill land development, recapitulation options and opportunities. Every time I get that right, I feel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I respectfully defer this to Ms. Weber to walk us through the background of it and we can have a conversation.
Thank you. Council, or committee, we brought this report forward December 10th to look at some opportunities for infill land development. And the motion or the request at the time consensus was to bring back more detail about options 3 and options 5. So the report's before committee to review those two options, one being list properties with a realtor or using a pilot project for, say, residential development. Apologies, there's a clause in the document that says a draft guideline to inform the land acquisition and management policy. That was kind of a last minute change in the process, and we're gonna bring that guideline forward at a later date. My apologies that we didn't pull that. So options 3, we just wanted to flesh out some of the details for council about what that would look like, listing properties with the town, or with the realtor. So the property, the infill land parcel detailed listing has a listing of what we call the tier 1 properties, which were the 9 properties that the town of Hinton has possession of that are serviced to date. 8 of 9 of those properties, however, would require some kind of subdivision and zoning to be done, with exception of 201 McLeod, which is already zoned for residential. So in our option 3 for listing it with a realtor, council and committee would have the option then to pick which parcels they chose to look through and work on. If they decide to do some of that rezoning ahead of time, list all the properties available or none of the properties available or 1 or 2 with a realtor and go from there. So it would alleviate some of the requirement for administrative staff time because all of the day-to-days would be handled by a real estate agent themselves. The benefit of listing the properties publicly, as we would see, is that it promotes that transparency of what is for sale with the town of Hinton, allowing more people to see what is for sale, what's being considered. It would increase the exposure to potential buyers or investors for those properties because it would be listed publicly on a site such as realtor.ca. And then it may result in also more competitive pricing because more people would have access to see that. The second part of that, the drawback of using the option of listing with a realtor would be that the municipality would have limited control over the future user development timeline of a parcel, meaning that if subzoning or zoning was redone on those parcels, you could indicate the intent is for residential development or it's commercial or industrial, but much beyond that the municipality wouldn't have as much control or as much oversight on. Another potential consideration would be the timeline for development may or may not be itemized in there, but could be. And then, of course, community opposition. So once that parcel is sold, they've got to go through their own processes with our development services division. And there might be opposition to what that parcel is getting developed as or for in the community. Option 5 is the pilot project where administration brought forward the idea that we could just choose one or two or a grouping of parcels from that list of tier 1 properties to just use as a pilot to sort of test that market. What does that market look like? And with that idea, the benefits would be, you know, limited risk of selling just one or a group of those parcels, rather than just listing every parcel that could be available for the town of Hinton. Reduced cost of advertising, because in the pilot, we would probably elect to just put it on the town website through our social media platforms versus openly on the public market. And also the opportunity to obtain proposals that would align with council's strategic plan. So that gives you a little bit more oversight of what it could be. The drawbacks of that option, again, would be the limited marketing. It's maybe not as transparent because it's only going to reach those that we reach with our town website and social media and perhaps newspaper. And again, the same kinds of drawbacks, limited control over that future use or development timeline on the development. And then, of course, community opposition is always a consideration. With that, I think in the package, we included some examples of the option 5 for the pilot with communities from Lakewood and Medicine Hat, and some of the information that they provide, which are kind of different, but really interesting packages. And then as also what it would be like, so using the government of Alberta, if we listed with a realtor, this is some of the bare bones information that the town would provide for that listing, and then all that information gets directed then to the realtor that's looking after that file. And I'm open to any questions from council committee.
Thank you. Council, questions, comments, directions? Councilor Haas?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You mentioned one of the drawbacks being if someone would buy the land and then bring it to development for permits or whatever, but it didn't, what they were proposing wasn't gonna work. Is that something that a buyer could do ahead of time? They're considering this, you know, buying a chunk of land, but we want to bring it to the development department to see, you know, what is being proposed, if that's a possibility, you know, to try and overcome that obstacle.
Absolutely, and I'm sorry, maybe I misled you there, I misspoke. We would want to be rezoning those properties to whatever council committee's goals are for that property. If the goal is, we would like to see commercial development, that zoning could be done ahead of time. And then they have a very clear understanding through our land use bylaw, what the permitted and discretionary uses are the development, so they can consider that before purchase.
Okay.
Absolutely.
If I can just follow up.
Please.
So the only thing that we wouldn't then have control over potentially is the time frame. So if they buy a piece of parcel of land and then say they're gonna be residential, but it takes 5 years or 10 years or whatever, we don't have any control of that. That's the downside. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Race?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is a pilot project. So let's say we've sold the land. Would we be assisting them with any, you know, infrastructure concerns? Would we be helping out with frontage fees or permitting? Or how detailed are we going to get into this?
Thank you for the question, Councilor Race, through the chair. In the pilot project, if you look back at the proposals or the other proposals from the other communities, there's varying degrees of that where we could outline some of the incentives, some of the things the town is willing to consider for a development and things that we're not willing to consider. And I would think that through a pilot project, which would be option 5, those things could be written in as per council's wish.
Thank you.
Council? Any discussion, questions, or direction? Councilor Haas?
I would move that the committee direct administration move forward with option 3 to bring forward to a future committee, the whole meeting as discussed. That doesn't preclude if someone else wants to do option 5, but I'm very interested personally, if I can even speak to it, the option 3. This is a different approach that we've never taken before, and I think that this putting in the hands of a realtor. And their contact lists and their ability to promote it, it's in their best interest to sell it, for their reason, profit and for them as well, and. I just think this is something, it puts it in the hands of people that do this for a living. And I think it's something to definitely consider. And then the fact that it's coming back, sorry, okay, so it's gonna be coming back to the committee, the whole meeting again, gives the opportunity also to get some input from realtors in the community, get some feedback potentially as well of their thoughts on this, because I think this is something that we should entertain, moving forward, so thank you.
Thank you. Counselor, go ahead, Chambers.
Thank you through the chair. I'll be supporting the direction, the consensus that's on the floor. I think we're behind the 8 ball, I think, in a lot of things when it comes to development across the whole, and I think being able to put this stuff up through a realtor, really get that out there. That's kind of the intent of why we started these conversations in the first place, was to really have a good grasp of what was available, what could move ahead, and I think it'll just bring a lot more options to the table. So certainly support seeing this option 3 coming forward.
Thanks, Counselor. Any Counselor raise?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So how do you select the, realtor? We have so many in town.
Mhm.
How do you select them?
When I was reviewing other communities, I looked at about 10 different communities. And what they ended up doing was they listed it with realtor.ca, so I don't know that mechanism. But what I noticed was for a specific town, that more than one realtor was listed on multiple properties. So if you had 5, if they had, for instance, 5 properties in that town, they all had a different listing realtor. So I'm not sure how the split is done, if that's done independently through the realtor.ca mechanism. So that's something we would look into. Councilor Richard, thank you for the question.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Counselor. Council, any further discussion? Mr. Mayor?
Thank you. I'll be supporting this motion at this time, but I hope that it comes back for conversation about council's strategy with each of these lots. I'm definitely not interested in listing for sale all of the lots in any of these tiers, but I am absolutely interested in seeing some of them get developed. But I think council needs to have a strategic discussion about what we want to see on some of these lands, because I don't think it's a just simple straight, they're all appropriate for residential, for instance. So I hope that comes back with the conversation, but I'll be supporting this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council, any further discussion on this? Counselor Hall?
Just, I guess, to the mayor's comment, I'm assuming that is what the plan is coming back to a community development meeting, because I agree, that we need to have that conversation on the plots of land, so I'm assuming that, but can the administration confirm that? Mr. Russo?
Yeah, through to the chair, to the council and committee. When we had our internal conversation among ourselves, one of the key points were to identify how much of these lands that are not zoned residential right now would be appropriate to be rezoned accordingly. Secondly, we also need to look at how much green space are we potentially sacrificing that could have an impact when you look at it from a 10,000 feet proposal for the town. So we are very conscious of that. So in short, to the mayor's comment, we will bring this back with those elements looked at through that lens.
Counselor, are you good with?
Yeah,
that? Okay,
absolutely.
perfect.
Thank you.
Council, any additional, Counselor Ostache?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just getting back to a question that was asked earlier regarding limited control over future use and development timeline. Now that this option's been put forward as as motion, what can we see when this report comes back in terms of what we can do to help to manage appropriate development timelines and future future uses?
Please, if I may attempt this. Through to Councillor Ostache, the way we look at this is that we touched on, we are not in the business of likely selling every lot. We may select 3 out of the 7 or 9, and out of the 3 we'll determine, is it serviceable? How serviceable is it? How long will the zoning take? So those would be some of the enablers that we would be using to say, okay, this lot, based on the potential that we got back in the EOI, will help us to get to market in 2-3 years. And if we want to put a cap on in terms of development, saying, okay, 5 years is probably the max, and then we claw it back in the event of things not happening at certain milestones, that would be your prerogative as council to put that into the conditions.
If I could follow up.
Please.
Well, yeah, I look forward to seeing some options like that when this comes back. My big concern about selling off municipal property is that it gets bought and then just held without development. That's been a fairly well voiced concern amongst Hinton residents on a lot of our vacant properties, that it just gets bought up and then never developed. And so we want to make sure that something like that doesn't happen if the town just decides to divest these properties. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Council, any further discussion on this before we look to call the question? Seeing none, then we will call the question that committee direct administration to move forward with option 3 to bring forward to a future committee of the whole meeting as discussed. Council, if you can please vote electronically now. And that is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Council, any additional directions or discussion on this item? Just a point of clarification to administration, I just want to make sure I was reading the report properly. If it was the desire of council to also put forward option 5, that they can work in tandem together, correct? Correct. Yeah. Thank you. Council, any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, then we will move on to item 4.4, the Bhutan Lands Seniors Housing Concept Financial Requirement. Admin?
That will be mine, Mr. Chair. So thank you, Council Committee, for the opportunity to bring this back to you. So just to give you some context, back in July 24, I should say, July the 23rd, we had this before council where we basically walked you through housing options for Bhutan Lands. And one of the key aspects that we focused on as administration was getting seniors housing, the potential of moving that forward on the subject matter lands. I want to go back, that council would recall that we had a group called Exquisite Care that came to us in July of 23. They are still pretty active in terms of the granting, they're waiting for the province, they're still in conversations, I believe. So that land, as you see on page 68 of your package, is still somewhat spoken for. However, if that does not go forward, we have a greater footprint to look at housing options. So what you have before you tonight is really a segment that we've taken out of the July the 23rd, 2024 meeting that we brought forward in terms of seniors housing. And the concept that we brought forward was not that that is going to be the full answer, nor the panacea to these lands being developed, is to look at seniors housing that are at grade. Now, Exquisite Care was going to bring in a transitional type of housing, accommodation for level 4. And as you know, that this land is already serviced for seniors to a certain level. Combining what we are talking about tonight here versus what Exquisite Care is doing, what we already have in the town, we came up with the campus of care approach, meaning that people can transition out of the existing home, whatever they own today, start it up and likely come and live in these smaller 800 to 1200 square feet homes that we were looking through the lens of a life lease. Now, the purpose of tonight is not to talk about the pros and cons of a life lease. We know there's been much media talk about it. We know that the province in one of the Alberta Bill 12, it was called, they made some changes which is supposed to help. However, we've had some broader conversations from a legal perspective that there are ways to get your arms around this. But really what is before you tonight is that, if you recall, my colleague Ms. Webb and I talked about $100,000 that we wanted to bring forward. That would help us to be able to develop a concept, a layout, what would this look like, how many units can it take? But what we have before us tonight is that we have an ask of $50,000. And that is to develop a 3-pronged approach. One meaning a scenario research and development, meaning that we're looking at what the impacts of the revised Bill 12 is. We're looking at scenarios again that could help us to cost out 800 square feet to 1100 to 1500. So we'd have real numbers to work with. As you know, that the life lease is basically, in simple terms, the potential renter can then put in X amount of dollars to help kickstart the project, and the rest is then either provided through a grant, and the town potentially subsidizing the land or granting the land for this or leasing the land. And then gets taken care of by an overarching management group that will take care of from stem to stern, meaning from design to construction and then the eventual management of it. So the part two is really the sensitivity testing of the financial model. That will tell us it's gonna cost you extra to 800. There could be a garage attached to it. The maintenance will be taken care of as an extra cost to the resident. Those are all the things that we'll bring forward. We'll have an ability to compare things with today's market. We're gonna look at other models that could fit the scenario for seniors that are pretty fit and able, and it's just looking at a less of a stressful lifestyle, not to worry about yard work or any snow removal. Part three of this 50,000 requirement is a workshop where we'll actually talk to our residents. There has been informal conversations had with Ms. Webb and I, with some seniors that has come to see us showing interest. And it's been very sort of enlightening for me to see the desire to see this file move forward in the right way. The other part of the 50,000 is really the concept and planning that we want to bring back to you, meaning that if you look at the subject lands that shows Bhutan on page 68, it will basically show you how many units we can fit on, what the phasing can be, what the sizing would be, and what the cost shortfall is and what type of granting we can go after. The aim for administration is that we don't want to burden our existing monetary resources to put anything in. If we own the land, that's a good thing. Servicing, we'll talk more about that at the given time. So we're not really factoring that in due to certain developments that may be forthcoming. So at this point, I want to just stop and allow council to ask us any questions.
Councillor Haas?
Yes, thank you for self-administration, but I just have a quick question on the concept and design and the planning and the fitting and stuff. I'm hoping the answer is yes, but you know, the last council did the, a budget and went through the correct, exercise. So will that be able to utilize some of that information for that area? Cause it's kind of laid out the area so far. I'm hoping we can use that, cut some of the costs, or reason why it's not as much.
Through the chair to Councillor Haas, the short answer is yes.
Okay, good.
If you remember, the charrette said that we're gonna have intergenerational housing, we've got seniors housing, there was a brief done. So we basically extrapolated, this is not a lost document, I actually have it right in front of me here.
Right.
That this has really been the Bible for us that we followed. However, there has been some deviations as time changed for us to optimize the land itself.
Thank you. Sure.
Thank you. I have myself up next. Just referencing the estimated costs and the source of funds. In the report on page 2 of 3, on the request for decision, it says confirmation by Director of Corporate Services. Because it's an unbudgeted $50,000. Do we have any more specifics on what recommended area those funds should come from? Should it be the will of council?
At this juncture, Councillor Lagoon, we do not have the exact bucket from where it would be coming from. And the reason why we put it in, we did have a conversation with our director, and she just wanted to, since the budget been passed, and a couple of things she wants to organize in terms of what granting is available. And then when we come back with an updated report, based on how council goes this evening, we will have that confirmation of that source of funding.
Okay. That would, so I'll allow myself a clarification. So the recommended action is to bring this to a regular council meeting as presented. So I'm assuming that at that time, when it comes to regular council, we have the source of funding identified. Okay. Councillor Chambers, then, oh, sorry. Councillor Chambers?
Yeah, I wanted to say, I'm just excited to see this going forward. I think it's the right plan for an underserved section of our senior population at the moment. I think it's responsive to what we've been hearing in community. Also happy to see the deep dive on the legalities of what's happened really since COVID times with the life lease programs. There can be a lot of risk, but there's also a lot of reward within these senior campus communities, and I think we have an incredible opportunity with the lands in that area to achieve some of these things. So happy to see that deep dive going in on some of the different aspects of that to try to, like you said, get your hands around what that can look like. And certainly support that going forward.
Thank you, Councillor Haas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move the committee direct administration to bring the Bhutan Land Senior Housing Concept Financial Request Report to a regular meeting. Regular council meeting as presented, if I can speak to it.
Please.
Yeah, I'm excited about this to see, I think it's perfect timing with other things that are happening in development in that area. With the provincial government bringing in those homes, gonna be putting in there next year. This is, I think, a great opportunity, especially too with the servicing of that area. So I think having this, this project, taking that 50,000, granted, we don't know where it's coming from yet, but we'll hear that, when we do hear this at regular, but I think having this assessment and the concept and design planning will help that area grow, as needed, for the senior population. So I'm all in favor of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really don't know if I'm in favor of it or not. This recommendation was to bring the Bhutan Lands Housing Options Detailed Report to this meeting. I'm not saying that. I actually thought we would see a report that said, we're gonna put grade level homes here, we're gonna do duplexes, we're gonna do this, that we were on the move. And that's not what I'm saying. So I'm torn. Thank you, sir.
Council? Any further discussion on the direction on the floor? Councillor Haas.
Well, on that note, I mean, I don't want to assume, but I'm guessing the reason we don't have that housing auction detailed report is because of the finances that are required to create that report. So I'm assuming that the administration attempted that, but realized we need some dollars to put towards that, to make that, to bring that forward to council and as a plan. So am I correct?
Admin?
To the chair, to councillors, that in principle is correct. What we're seeking to do here as administration was to extrapolate from what we brought to council on July the 23rd, 2024. And there was a seniors component attached to it. And we looked at what could we move forward more expeditiously so that the Bhutan land can have some development. If you go back to page 68, you will see that segment of land that shows where the seniors housing could go. We also talk about the lands may include various types of housing that could be for seniors, including livelihood options. So we are looking at the 2 tiers, but we're looking at different phasing of it. So coming forward with the 10,000 that we've asked for in this 50,000, there would be a layout that would show you proposed seniors housing, potentially a life piece, and potential other intergenerational housing.
Council? Councillor Race.
Thank you, sir. So in reading this, it says part 1 and 2, if we move ahead with 50,000, part 1 and 2 could be done within 90 days.
Through to the chair again, through to councillor Race, please, that 90 days would outline the financial plan, the sensitivity around that financial plan, the funding that we could obtain. And that could transcend into your transitional housing as well. So 90 days to create that base plan and model so that we can come back to council and say, okay, we can build this with the available funds, the lands that you have, and this may be the shortfall. So is there a grant for this? Yes or no? And then we'll proceed on that basis. At least it gives us a roadmap and it gives us a segment of work that can be executed. This is the most likely route that we can go. And we know that the need for seniors is growing. And we want to be not just careless about how quickly we bring it forward, but we know that some seniors are looking at potentially living out town. And we want to prevent that. The best is if we can contain our seniors and make it worthy living and give them the concept of care in Hinton. That would be a win for the community right there.
Go ahead, Councillor Race.
So, I just think the world of you. So I'm being very respectful here. We start off good, we get a little bit of momentum, but we never see it through. I'm 7 years on council and we haven't built a senior home yet. So how do we do that? How do we get that momentum and not stop? We just keep going. So
To the chair, if I may attempt to answer that question, that is exactly the mindset that Ms. Weber, CAO, and myself had on the spot. That if we can chunk this into pieces that are meaningful and that will have a powerful outcome. that this is one catalyst, what we're seeking to do. We have not lost sight of the entire development. But as we know, there has been other sort of good things that could help the development along. Hence, we brought this forward in a much more expeditious manner. I know July the 23rd till now several months, but there's been many hours of deliberation, talking to experts, legal side, so that we could have packaged this evening that would make it palatable for us to potentially move forward.
So if you get her done, part 1 and 2, prior to 90 days, feel free to come back early.
That is on track.
Yeah, thank you.
I'll speak to the direction on the floor. When I look at, and I'll be supporting it. That being said, and I think I'm supporting some of Councillor Race's concerns. I think as a town, historically, we've done really well at looking and evaluating potential plans. Looking at our resources and saying, what do we want? When I look at the analysis page between 1 and 2 on the RFP, the part that gives me pause that I'm concerned about, and I feel like I'm speaking also in support of Councillor Taylor, things that he's mentioned before in the past, revolves around part 3. And we've identified a stakeholder workshop. I am concerned that a simple workshop or a workshop process, I don't mean to say it's simple. I'm concerned that a workshop process might not be enough given today's economic climate or given the physical realities of builders in the region ranging from, say, Hinton to Edmonton. We know it's hard to get developers from outside of Hinton in. And so I wonder, and if admin has a comment on this, that would be very welcome. It's hard to get other builders into the community. It's hard to entice them. Have we considered a greater strategy that is a little bit more aggressive, like going out of town, targeting builders who are in this kind of business, thinking about what kind of incentives we can offer them to make it very attractive for them to do business in the community, to build these homes specifically? Because in the past, and I think back to my first years on council back in 2012, we had a local developer look at grade seniors housing. And that single quote cost on a per unit basis was upwards of $350,000 at that time, which was it was untenable for a senior looking to get out, sell their home and move into a new place. But again, when you lack competition, you're forced to deal with whatever quote is on the table. So I apologize, that's a lot, but that's my concern. Has admin discussed that at all? Mr. Rousseau?
Yeah, through to the chair, to all of the committee. That has been something that has not just been tossed around, it's been looked at deeper. One of the things, not to put the model on the table to say this is, but there's the various ways of partnering. And partnering, we often throw P3 out and P2s and all of that. But within that is embedded many options. So for a builder to come to Hinton, there has to be an incentive for them. And that goes in the partnering. So we've got a lot of things that is lining up for us in terms of, before the servicing would have been 100% on the town's cost. That likelihood is becoming much more less of an expectation for us to service the land because of other things that are surrounding it. So that is one big push that is helping us to try and coincide that. But back to the principal question in terms of have we thought about it? We have. Okay. Because if we do not, once we get through this, assuming council approval, is to go ahead to bring it back to you and that carries at council, that would be one of the things. What is the model to Councillor Royce's point, other than having been here 7 years in this making, what can we do to expedite this to have a 2027 shovels in the ground potential, as an example? And that is kind of the yardstick that we've applied when you could see shovels in the ground. But the model in terms of how the housing will be brought, what is that incentive? Those are things that we talked about when we looked at the residential, commercial incentives. That's not the discussion that is coming to a future council meeting or a committee of the whole.
Awesome, great, thank you so much. I had Councillor Hosler next.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, just to build off that a little bit, because one of the things that I took away from our last AM conference a lot of talk about housing, of course. And they had one particular presentation, and the drive of modulars has been extremely, it seems to be the most prevalent use of development, you know, because it's not, because as Councilor Magoon said, it's hard to get the developers in town to build, but when they can build offsite. So I agree, I think, you know, thank you, I appreciate that we're gonna be expanding, you know, out there, and, you know, I know the idea that modulars, you know, are not ideal homes, they've come a long ways, from that you could probably not even tell it's a modular to some degree, plus they have cost points, I mean, I remember they said that you could have a modular anywhere from 100 to 600,000, you know, so there's so many different things that this area probably could benefit from as well, so I appreciate the fact that we're gonna be reaching out to more and having that conversation, because I think that's what's gonna make this area successful for sure. Thank you.
Mr. Russo?
Yeah, if I could just through the chair to the rest of the committee, something that we often don't talk about, but when we did those few tiny homes that is now on sort of on the skirt of the Bhutan lands, we did exactly that. Ms. Webb and I went out to Edmonton and actually visited modular buildings. And we fanned it out to 3 of them in a very short time. And they came through for us. Yeah, we had certain challenges and which happens with construction, but to the point of, are we gonna farm this further field to entice? And they came, and we were in budget. So to some extent, the servicing cost was about 50,000 above, I remember. But in the big scheme of it was a success, because the town of Hinton leveraged itself outside to bring in external expertise. Not forgetting that we used the local contractors to do certain other aspects of it. So we want to balance those two things as we move forward potentially on this spot.
Thank you. Council, any further discussion on this item? And admin, thank you very much for the clarifications on those. Seeing none, then we'll call the question that committee direct administration to bring the Bhutan Lands Senior Housing Concept Financial Request Report to a regular council meeting as presented. Council, if you can please vote electronically now. And that is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Mr. Mayor. Over. Council, anything else on this item? Very well, we will move on to information items. Item 5.1. Council, committee, do you have any questions, or requests for information as related to the report? If not, then we would, Councilor Haas.
Thank you. I'd like to move the committee accept this report as information.
Very well. Council and committee, any discussion on that? Oh.
Just a real quick, you know, I appreciate actually all the input that the community had on this. It seemed to get a lot of success, you know, and I believe a couple of things I think that to make it known. One of the things on the survey, there was some concern that you could do it over and over again, but I believe we confirmed with the administration that that was not the case. That one person could not do, they could do it, but it wouldn't be recognized at our end. So I think, you know, just to state that publicly, that it wouldn't skew the numbers in any way, shape or form. So I think that's important for our citizens to know that it is accurate information that they're getting. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor. Council, any further discussion on that item? Seeing none, we'll call the question that committee accept the survey results. Way train whistle for information. You can please vote electronically now. That is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Council, anything else on that? Seeing none, and we will move on to reporting, and I'll start at the far side of the table with Councilor Rice.
Could we talk about the letter from Minister Rowan? Before we do, council reporting?
It's not on the agenda.
All right, I have nothing to report.
Councilor Stasher.
Nothing to report. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Chambers. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I was at the Community Futures Board meeting last week, and the results of our decision not to fund the $10,000 request from Community Futures is that Community Futures in Hinton will be focused on their core programming, and we won't get any of the extras that they do in the community. This summer, that looks to be the Lemonade Day is not going to happen, and some of their other lunch and learns might not happen. That being said, there's a lot of work with the recovery in Jasper next door, and capacity is low, so that is the update from Community Futures, and that's all I have to report this week. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilor Haas?
I have to report, yesterday I attended our library board meeting. And not much to report there. We had some really good numbers. And I'm sure actually I believe our manager will be sharing those with our CEO in his monthly report. But we've got the review of the 2024 numbers, and they are all extremely much higher than 2023. So that was really exciting to see. A lot more happening in cybersecurity as well. A lot of our laptops and computers have been sent to YRL to get updated on their software. We're also making room, and I believe that's they'll be talking with administration and to infrastructure and maintenance, I think. But the deep freeze software, so it's right now whenever anybody uses public computers, at the end of the day, our staff have to go into the computer and erase all the background of what was done. The deep freeze software will do that automatically as soon as that resident uses the computer, logs off, then it'll erase what they were seeing, which will also help a great deal in any of the cybersecurity issues that might pop up as well. So lots of that is going on. We have received all of our capital projects for that area. I believe all the things that we were waiting for have gotten delivered, so that was good, and there's great feedback on that area still coming in. I also had an ASH meeting last night as well, so the only thing I want to plug for that is Thursday night is the Steve Olson. Want to make sure that everybody is aware that tickets are still on sale. We did sell some more. Would like to see a lot more sold, but you can also buy them at the door. So if you're looking for something to do on Thursday night and don't know what else to do, you can come on down to the path and you can purchase your tickets there. There's a lot of other things coming up. I just saw they announced that the AC/DC tribute band is coming in March. So that's gonna be, we'll see how that goes, but I'm pretty sure that'll be pretty full. March 6th, I believe. And then just waiting on one other piece of administrative things, and can announce another coming later in the year as well. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Councilor Haas. I have nothing to report. Moving on to 6.2, Chief Administrative Officer.
Thank you, Chair. Nothing to report.
Council, we had removed item 7.1, which brings us to section 8, adjournment. Mr. Mayor.
Move to adjourn.
Very well, council, any discussion on that while we're waiting for it to appear? Seeing none, call the question that committee adjourned the meeting at 4:58 PM. You can please vote electronically now. In favor, okay, and that is carried unanimously. We are adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody. Thanks, Edmund.